It's time for the Washington Whisperer. In a 100-page document issued by the Vatican last week, Pope Francis declared fighting social injustice by caring for migrants and the poor is just as holy a pursuit for Catholics as opposing abortion. The Pope urged Catholics not to give excessive importance to certain issues like opposing abortion while ignoring other issues like immigration. This is not the first time that the Pope has attempted to soften the Roman Catholic Church's stance on abortion, which is one of the strictest among the religious institutions. Let's talk about the Pope and his latest progressive act. Now this Pope, Pope Francis, has been transformative when it comes to moving the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church into the 21st century. And this document, entitled Rejoice and Be Glad, focuses on how people can be holy in a contemporary and secular world. The ideal that Christians can grow in holiness with prayer alone, but need to help those in need. And to be frank with you, as somebody who is a student of the Bible, this actually connects us right back to the Bible full circle. And it's a part of the Bible that you don't hear very often from many of those individuals who profess to be evangelicals in the political realm. So the Bible says a couple things. In the Beatitudes, Jesus says, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. And it goes on to talk about all other individuals that are blessed. But even in the Old Testament, one of the greatest commandments that Jesus gives us is to love thy neighbor. And it's interesting because I think the definition of what neighbor is has changed in 2018. Because if you really truly think about it, neighbor is less of the person that lives next to you and more of the global community that we live in. And let me be very clear. The three most violent countries in the world, America, I'll give you their names: Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. These three nations are America's neighbors. They sit in our hemisphere, and they are literally one country over from the United States border. Our president ran on a platform of building a wall to make our borders safe and to stop illegal crossing across our southern border with Mexico, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. And while, yes, we can all agree that some heinous things cross our border, like drugs and gangs, and there's human trafficking, and we need to do something about it, we also must remember that crossing that border are also people yearning for hope. The Statue of Liberty in New York, in the New York Harbor, says the following: give us your poor, give us your tired, give us your huddled masses yearning for freedom. And many of the people that cross our southern border, while they don't see the Statue of Liberty, that is why they come to America. They come to America because they see us as a neighbor. They see us as a neighbor that have opportunity. They see us as a neighbor. They see us as a neighbor where there's hope, where there's safety. And we have two options. We can build a wall and we can shut them out. We actually have three options. We can build a wall, we can shut them out, we can let them in, or we can work with their government to make their countries safer. If we were true neighbors and we were true believers in God's love, we would do two of those three options. Number one, we would work on letting those women and children who are yearning for freedom and yearning for safeties in, especially if they're seeking political or economic asylum. And two, we would do everything in our power to ensure that they live in safe, welcoming, and thriving communities in their home country. People say to me all the time, Richard, why would we spend money on somebody else's country? And my response to them is, why wouldn't we? We've done it every other time. We spend about $1 billion a day in Afghanistan. And we've been doing that for almost 2 decades. Same goes for Iraq. And if you go back in history, we can say the same about Vietnam. And we can say the same about Korea. And we can say the same about Europe. Over and over and over again, we have spent American tax dollars on nation building in continent after continent after continent. And many of these continents are far away from America. Many of these continents, you have to turn the globe once, or a half a sphere, or a fourth of a sphere to find them. But in the case of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, you don't have to turn the globe. All you have to do is look down a little bit to find them. These 3 countries are our neighbors. And we should be doing everything in our power to ensure that our neighbors and the citizens of those countries live in safe, welcoming, and thriving communities. And to be honest with you, making those countries safe and thriving is a lot cheaper than building a $33 billion wall along our southern border. Not to mention the fact, America, that building that wall still won't stop the importation of illegal drugs along the contiguous and thousands of miles longer sea borders that line the United States of America. So going back to the Pope, to bring this full circle, we in this country continue and over again to have a conversation about what a woman should do with her body after becoming pregnant. Or hell, what a woman should do with her uterus overall. Whether or not she should have access to birth control. Whether or not she should be able to get a transvaginal ultrasound. And yet, once that baby is born, we could give 2 hoots about what happens to it in the United States. We could care less if that baby eats at night. We could care less whether or not that baby goes to a thriving, safe, welcoming neighborhood public school. We could care less whether or not that baby has access to safe and clean drinking water. We could care less about whether or not that baby has safe housing. And that story goes on, and I can give you litanies of headlines to talk about, right here in America, how we could care less about the indigent, how we could care less about the abandoned, how we could care less about the underprivileged, how we could care less about the poor. There's a headline to talk about every one of those. Better yet, I could just list off a number of cities, and you know the story. Flint, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan, the state of Oklahoma, the state of West Virginia, the state of North Carolina, the state of Mississippi, the state of Louisiana. But I digress. What the Pope is trying to say in this 100-page letter, America, is we need to take a look at our own hearts. And we need to realize that in our hearts, we suffer from a sin. And that sin is called gluttony. It's a sin of overconsumption, because we are so overconsumed with our own success and our own privilege and our own blessings that we have picked one single wedge issue to focus billions of dollars on. We spend billions of dollars each campaign cycle focused on when a woman should have an abortion, how she should have an abortion, whether or not she should have access to birth control. But in the meantime, in between time, we've forgotten about those suffering around the world. We've forgotten about slavery. We've forgotten, and when I mean slavery, I mean because slavery is happening across the world. Right? We've spent billions of dollars on both sides of the aisle debating about whether or not we should have a wall. But yet we've forgotten about the humanity of those individuals that walk for thousands of miles, searching and yearning for freedom